Your ability to produce income through value creation is what makes you the most money. And if your entire life is the energy of what you cut out, you miss out on what you can create. When I went to graduate, I had the 6 worst months of my life. And here's why. My grandfather is my hero. Like, this is the guy I'm most close to in the world. And even though he's a coal miner, he was the only person I knew that was an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial, okay? So he lived in this town called East Carbon, Utah. By a show of hands, look out there, see how many people have heard of this tiny town. We've got one. East Carbon, I think 1,000 people live there right now. It's that small. And he was a TV repairman, and he sold Zenith TVs. Do you remember Zenith TVs? Like furniture. Like, you gotta be tough, right? If you're even gonna move those suckers. And I remember he would like get homemade tortillas from clients, and he was getting awards in the community because he was a business owner on the side. Plus, very Italian of him, he played the accordion. And they went out and they played at all these weddings and everything. So I was fascinated by the relationships and the gratitude. And my dad, who's a coal miner, I never got to see that side of him because I've never stepped foot in a coal mine. And he's not getting community awards, and he didn't love what he was doing. But my grandfather, anytime we talked, we didn't talk about the coal mines, we talked about the gig that he did. We talked about the clients that were getting a TV, and as a 5-year-old, I would get in his red van, and I would go to the TV calls with him, and he'd be repairing, and he'd say, "Don't touch here," but what do you think a 5-year-old with my curiosity would do? I would get shocked by the TVs, right? But he was my very first client, and that was just because it was a token of, hey, this is my grandson. But let me just kind of fast forward with that. He was my first actual client that really wanted the services too. Because when his family, he had 2 older sisters, managed money, the way they did it is they all put it in the oldest sister's name who never got married. And then she got really sick, and when she was in the hospital and was gonna go to nursing care, they thought it was gonna deplete the $550,000 that this family had saved up over basically 45, 50 years, right? And I actually, through research and reading books, figured out how to protect that money. 2/3 of it at least was 100% protected through paper trail, and 1/3, I still made a good case if she went there, because normally there's a 3-year look back. But at the same time, you know what my grandfather said to me when I was done with it? When are you gonna get a real job? Because that's when they left Italy, because they had a business and it didn't work out, there was so much scarcity. And so I just admire that so many of you are taking this leap from being corporate and going entrepreneurial. And I've seen it work so many times, and I've seen how scary it is because I had a hard time going against my hero and my grandfather. But guess what? Steve Harrop was actually one of my first clients. It was a 6-figure income to me just on what I did for him because he was so wealthy. And I showed my grandfather that transaction 6 months out of college. And it was more than he had ever made in a single year. And I didn't show it to brag, I showed it to let him know it'll be okay. And there wasn't a day for the rest of his life that he didn't grab my arm, that he didn't hug me, that he didn't get tears in his eyes because I made that leap, because he knew it would change our family's financial future and our destiny forever. And the reason he didn't encourage me before is he didn't want to go back to what happened in Italy, where there wasn't enough to feed the family and not see the kids for 7 years, right? So, now that we have the framework of why I asked the question, the guarantees, that's where we went into the IRS. That's guaranteed. If you save money from the IRS, we're talking black and white strategies, nothing offshore, nothing that gets in trouble. We've been doing this forever. Nobody's ever gone through an audit and owed more cash. Okay, one time I forgot to tell someone to pay state tax, so they owed like $2,000 more. I covered it because I was the jackass that forgot. But there's nothing out that I'm going to share with you that's in the gray area. This is black and white. This is things you could do. The second I was interest. We said the first C was credit. The second C was collateral. The third C is the right cash flow reporting. If you don't have the right cash flow reporting, then you're not going to get the best interest rates. And the fourth is the right connections. So we've had people that go in and we teach them something called a Streamline Refinance, where if you have equity, you've always paid on time, and you have the 4 C's handled, that you can actually, without doing a full refinance, maybe pay a $200 partial appraisal fee, or maybe sign 3 documents rather than 30 on the closing, get a lower payment with the same institution. That happens about 1/3 of the time, right? Or you could restructure loans, or you can learn which loans, like an installment loan, is infinitely better for you than a credit loan, like an open line. So when it comes to interest, we've invented a process called cash flow optimization back in 2005. I would like to take credit for inventing it, but it was actually a rocket scientist named Dale Clark who went through our program, and in 362 days, he got economically independent with less than $100,000 net worth. Now, that wasn't easy, because he did eat peanut butter and Miracle Whip sandwiches to get there, and I'm just not willing to do that, you know? Like, does that ever make sense to put Miracle Whip on peanut butter? Like, I would take the 3-year route, if that's what it took. Cool, we'll just take, because we always say it's 3 to 7 years to economic independence, not 30 years. There's no scrimping, there's no cutting back, and we abide by what Benjamin Franklin said, wealth isn't just the man that has it, it's the man that lives it, right? So I want you to enjoy life along the way because you're your greatest asset. Your ability to produce income through value creation is what makes you the most money, and if your entire life is the energy of what you cut out, you miss out on what you can create, right? So instead of reduction, we're focused on production. So on the cash flow optimization process, he figured out how we could put $2,484 per month into people's lives if they did between $250,000 and $500,000 of revenue. If they did between $500,000 and $1 million, it was $4,117. And this isn't like cutting out or cutting back. It's simply finding the holes and finding the leaks. The third I is insurance. Most people have improper structure, duplicate coverages. So easy example. If you don't have an umbrella policy, you're probably paying too much on insurance. So you have car insurance, homeowner's insurance, an umbrella policy sits on top of both of them, which allows you to get a minimum on your car and home for liability, and the umbrella, if you have more than one car or more than one home, covers all of them. So we've had people like Glenda from Texas, she just raised her deductibles because don't have a deductible that you're not gonna use. $100 deductible, would you make it a $300 claim? I wouldn't. So raise it up and use those dollars for more important protection, or get that umbrella policy. Then the umbrella policy means you can spend less on your car and home, and an umbrella might be like $200 a year for $1 million. So she saved $1,000 by raising deductibles and staying with the same company because she had 2 different companies. Then we used $305 to get the $1 million umbrella, so she had $900,000 more coverage and still walked away with about, close to $700 in her pocket. That's where there's duplicate coverages and costs. I'm not talking about whether you choose the Caveman or the Geico or whether you choose the Sports Star. They're spending a lot of money on those commercials, which means what? They're ridiculously profitable. So utilize them, don't be used by them. Here's the statement to write down that's so simple, and it'll forever transform how you look at insurance. Insure the catastrophic, never the inconsequential. Because you're you don't have to write down the rest. It's just insure the catastrophic, never the inconsequential. Because when you look at this, the most expensive dollar you pay for insurance is the first dollar. The least expensive dollar of insurance you pay for is the last dollar. So put companies worth billions of dollars on the hook for lots of money, not small amounts of money. And then what happens is, when you have a financial surprise sometime in the future, it's not going to derail or destroy you because you've transferred that risk. And I feel that at least 90% of the financial disasters that people face could have been prevented with proper planning. There are some that I don't care how much you plan, it's going to happen, but if we can stack the odds in your favor that 90% of the time it doesn't harm you, that's what matters, right? So use insurance for what it's intended for. So we have IRS, we have interest, we have insurance, and the last I is investments.